After being totally not being kidnapped and held hostage by stands, I have decided to make this video. Since I never really talk about her, I think it's maybe because she's in the middle. It's not like Kong, where I think there's a lot more of the overrating, but there's also some underration. Like, I think there's a lot more of a mix when it comes to Mothra. Some people, like, there's a lot of people who think she's like fucking Muto tier, and then a lot of people who think she's like above Ghidorah, which both are obviously wrong. But it shows that we have a mixed bag. But let's try to be as non-biased as possible on like both sides of the spectrum. So let's start with what she does in King of the Monsters. When she makes her entrance in the Ghidorah fight, we said she's able to partly disperse Ghidorah's extremely powerful storm. We then see she's able to use her webs to tag Ghidorah and web him up to the building a bit, which is quite impressive. It's not an AP feat, but it shows her webs are able to hold Ghidorah for a bit, which means pretty much anyone that's not Godzilla or Shima would also probably get held by the webs too for a longer period of time. Like if she shot it at the limbs or face. But then we get into the first problem, which is in the novel it is stated that Mothra could kill Ghidorah presumably with her stinger. Not only is this just off guard, which to be fair doesn't affect their ability, but still, the literal author of the book, Greg Keeves, goes out to confirm that this is non-literal and just hyperbolic, and it's not that literally the fact that she is going to kill Ghidorah. It's an idiom, as he says. It's an attempt when the opponent is in a weakened position. Even the writer, even at the very least, you think it is true. The writer says it says Ghidorah is in a weakened position. More or less the fact he calls it an idiom and a figure of speech. Also, in the King of the Monsters, while Rodan is relative to her, Mothra is the superior combatant in their encounter. With Rodan's fire burning her rings was the reason why she was kind of getting pressed later on, though once again, Rodan still scales, still able to like physically throw her around and shit. However, she's still able to do things like slam Rodan on the ground, knock him back with her snake claws? I don't know what to call them. And eventually put him down, not permanently, but for the fight, with a off-guard attack from the stinger to his shoulder. Which, as I've talked about Rodan before, while Ghidorah is weakened, Rodan is still able to contend and pierce the skin of a Ghidorah.
Rodan lands on Monster Zero and digs in its talons. Rick watches on a monitor.
Who was much stronger than any other Titan at the time except for Godzilla, placing Mothra already on the same tier as Rodan, and therefore above things like Kong, the Mutos, and the other lower tier kaiju. He also knows Mothra's energy was strong enough to stabilize burning Godzilla and make him not explode. And while it doesn't give his base a permanent amp, it does give him some new tricks and abilities. Then move on to GXK Mothra. While this is a different Mothra, in fact being said to be the mother of the Mothra we know and love, this Mothra is still considered evolved compared to her previous self. But it is also compared by the novel to King of the Monsters Mothra. Not only just they flat out stated it, but they compared the energy readings, and it's only off by like 3% in the novel, which does show there's not a huge difference between the two. So while there is arguments for both sides, I'd personally say at least the two are relative, but GXA probably edges out if anything. Speaking of those feats, she's able to knock Evolved Godzilla on his ass, even to the point where the novel said it was like he weighed nothing from a extremely long distance away. And pretty much stunned Godzilla as he only got up after not only Mothra landed and let Gia go off her back and then walk a bit, and only after Kong was on his feet again. That is only when Godzilla got up again. So it is also striking because it's not just like a lifting strength feat, as people like to claim. Because she's blatantly harming Evolve, there's no other way to put it, she is harming him. There's also the implication that the novel implies that Mothra is at the least a threat to Beast of Kong, but logically the statement implies above him, and the only reason Kong wasn't like looking down to her was because he knew that she was an ally, and otherwise he probably would have been fearful. That's the whole implication, that he viewed her as really strong. And considering that all Beast Glove Kong could do with his punches was make him stumble over or jerk back his head a bit, and not send him flying when you're a considerable distance away, I think it's kind of obvious who scales above who. This backed up by her feat against Shimo. Not only does she blatantly tank Shimo's beam, this not only resisting the freeze effects, but also resisting, and then proceeds to slap Shimo in the face, and once again actually harms her as Shimo roars in pain and doesn't recover until a valve broke out of her ice and started to charge at Shimo. Keep in mind, Shimo's beam is at the very least equal to an ancient Godzilla's atomic breath. Now, once again, the question of is she Ghidorah tier comes up. No. Being able to harm characters that are below but rival Ghidorah does not make her Ghidorah tier. Neither does using idioms to help prove a point. That isn't valid scaling, and considering while she is above the Fire Demon Rodan, Rodan still scales. He still gives her Shuggle, who lost to a weekend holding back Ghidorah, while Rodan does scale to the said Ghidorah. This should still signify she's definitely not Ghidorah, Godzilla, or Shimo tier. But as I mentioned before, she's definitely above Kong, including anyone below him or on the same range of power, like the Mech or Scar. She's also above Rodan. For the other two notable titans, Muto Prime and Tiamat, I think she'd probably be able to range bully Tiamat since she's probably smart enough to not get in close, or could just web him up or blind him. But if Tiamat can drag her underwater, she might get cut up and overpowered. I simply have a hard time believing that she could escape if Tiamat just constricted her and dragged her underwater. Muto Prime is kinda similar to a lesser degree. I'd have more of a likely time considering believing Mothra could tank a Muto Prime strike, considering she can tank a blast from an ancient Godzilla atomic breath, which a Aftershock's atomic breath, or at least semi-tank a blast from the atomic breath, while a blast from the atomic, or blast from a weaker atomic beam was able to send Muto Prime flying. And obviously, but I think Muto Prime, if he did a whole wombo combo on Mothra, could rip her apart, but that's if he could, which he can't. And considering a lot of Muto Primes are specifically tuned for Godzilla, they wouldn't have as much of effect. So the main conclusion of this video is that aside from Mothra and the two others most compared to him directly, Ghidorah and Shimo, there's not much Titans you can argue above the Moth except for Tiamat or Muto Prime in some specific situations. Please let me out of my fucking placement, please. Please, Mothra stands, please. I made the